Party Moses here again. Welcome back, everybody. We're back with the Army of Missouri on its retreat back to Papinsville after the Battle of Carthage. So, a couple things to start us off here on this episode of Grand Tactician Civil War. So, we obviously in the last episode just had the Battle of Carthage. We kicked out the Missouri State Guard out of Missouri. So, right now, Missouri is free of all pernicious secessionist influence, which is pretty great. But we do have to ask the question, was this little campaign worth it? Was it worth it to send the Army of Missouri over here? We can count our dead and injured in the hundreds. We took, fairly light casualties in the Battle of Carthage, but, the Missouri State Guard just retreated a short distance. We don't have the supplies to pursue, and because they trashed their supply depot, which was actually here in Carthage, we couldn't actually take advantage of all the items in that supply dump to resupply our army to pursue. So the question has to be, if you are in a similar situation in your campaign, if you are holding St. Louis, but there's a small part of, southwestern Missouri that's in Confederate hands, is it even worth it to pursue? And that has to be something you think about on your own. But we also have to worry about the fact that there might be another Confederate force somewhere in Missouri, and it looks like the Mississippi Corps of Instruction is jumping orders a little bit to go down and investigate. So Fremont, of course, is going to move down here, and he's going to try to check things out. So again, we'd like to see all of Missouri blue. That's the idea. But of course, there's quite a lot else to do in this department, in this theater of the war. So we've rearranged some of our troops just a bit. We now have the Department of Missouri headed by Irvin McDowell. He came back from his basically successful campaigning in the East. He's a political casualty of the politics of the Army of the Potomac, led by the young Napoleon himself, George McClellan. But he's going to be heading this department, right? And the department is essentially going to oversee almost all of the western, pretty much anything west of the Mississippi is going to fall into his purview. He will also be essentially in charge of all of the forts that are out here under federal control in Kansas and elsewhere, and is going to be responsible for, once again, kind of keeping everything in Missouri under control. Now, of course, we're also going to have another command here with Grant's Expeditionary Corps. Now that we have a supply depot built here in Cairo, Illinois, and now that we have a river fleet that's operating up and down the Mississippi, we can really start thinking about larger scale operations against the Confederates in the Trans-Mississippi region. So what I'd like to do is, once Kearny returns from his death march down here to Carthage, to see about shifting some forces around and getting at least two armies, or at least two independent corps, working together in this region. So for the early phase of 1862, what I'd really like to see is Grant, whatever his army happens to be called, once we rearrange things, I'd like to see Grant capture Memphis. Down here, this is a rail hub. This is an important place to capture here along the Mississippi River. And then to begin operations to move down to capture Vicksburg. Along the way, obviously, we're going to have to capture Jackson, Mississippi. I would like to take control, essentially, of this entire rail network. And I might even want to try to send armies, once we can take Memphis, it might be easier to supply armies that cut down here to Little Rock, Arkansas. That might help cut down on the supply issues in the Missouri State Guard here and the Western Army. But they're both such small forces that I doubt we're going to have to worry too much about fighting them. However, we do have the Army of the Mississippi, another 200-man army. This is a single battalion of artillery. And we have the larger Army of Mississippi, which is only 9,000 men if the information from my Mississippi squadron can be trusted. So there is a lot to do. There's a lot to do at the beginning of this war, and there's a lot to do back east as well. But for now, let us just advance some time, and let's get Kearny back to back to St. Louis, and we'll pick back up, unless there's something to see over here, with Fremont's Renegade Corps going searching for Confederates. Nothing spotted so far. So what I'm going to do is, because he's still actually drawing quite a lot of supply from the various regions around here, I'm going to actually put his army into scouting disposition. What this is going to do is basically, within his sphere, he's going to be collecting information about the Confederates around the area. But it also means that if he needs to, cooperate with any other armies in the area, his force will be considerably slower. It's essentially all of these guys are being dispersed about the country to go look for stuff, and hopefully we're going to be finding that there might be a secessionist army somewhere down here. There might not. We don't know, but I'd like to find out one way or another. So I'm going to let Kearny draw some supplies off the supply depot here. He is connected to it. And once he's back up in yellow readiness, we're going to have him march up here to Georgetown and take the rail back to St. Louis. So I'll meet you back up there, unless there's something else to see in the meantime. While we wait for Kearny to get to the railhead here, I want to show you a little. We mentioned before a little bit about how weapon standardization works. For one, we've got the Jocelyn carbines already, and to take a look at this, right, we've had Jocelyn carbines are at standardization 3, and making 50,000 will still take a really long time, so I'm obviously not going to do that. But if we want to look down at the Springfield rifle muskets, if I were to order 50,000 more Springfield muskets, I would get the entire batch in only 68 days. Their standardization is up to 18. It cost me less than $100 or more fewer than at the beginning of the campaign. So the higher your standardization score, the cheaper they are, the faster they produce. So it's worth it to go all in basically on one type of rifle rather than another. And it does seem like, I'm still not sure if it's related to the time you unlock the project or the number of pieces that you have made. So I don't know, but I'm going to order another batch of Springfield rifle muskets because I can get 50,000 now in less than 3 months, in a little over 2 months. That's pretty good. And you can still see that the difference between 11 standardization and 18 is monumental. The Springfield, or the Mississippi rifle, to produce 50,000 pieces is still going to take 100 more days than it would for the rifle musket. So whenever you're doing your campaigns, it behooves you. It's a good idea for you to, really try to make one arm your main arm, whether you're producing it or importing it. I'm not sure if import ever affects the standardization at all. But generally, as the production score goes up, it gets cheaper, it gets faster to produce, and it becomes more efficient for you to rely on those as your main arm rather than anything else. So that's all I wanted to mention, and we're going to go back to our slow crawl back across Missouri to get Phil Kearny back to St. Louis. But we've hopefully got some exciting stuff coming up in this episode, so bear with me here. Kearny has arrived back in St. Louis. I've paused the time, and we're going to do some reordering and restructuring, and we're also going to take a look at some more policies. So, we have just completed Industrialization 3, which means that we can massively increase our industrial subsidies, which mostly is going to go into handling things like, these failing businesses and upgrading more mines, that kind of thing. So that's not super duper exciting, of course, but we should take a longer look again at some more of the options that we have going forward. So Militia Act 4 is fairly attractive, although I'm not sure I'm going to need it. The war is going well quite for right now, and I'm massively outproducing the Confederates in terms of manpower. They just lost a ton because I think some of their contracts wiped out. They were a little higher than this, and they dipped down to about 90,000, and they're climbing back up right now. So they have just passed the draft. And that means that they're going to have a lot more men in their armies pretty soon. So I'm really hoping they don't massively increase really rapidly. I mean, it'll probably happen, but I'm really hoping they don't do it in like the real near term. So I don't need to recruit too much. And even if I do, another couple year contracts will put me into February 1864, which is very doable. It's very allowable. I'm thinking about government funding too. Possibly. I'm also thinking about Diplomacy 1. Or even Breadbasket 1. There's a lot we can do. So legal blockade is a really interesting one. This is an act. And a commenter actually pointed out something that I had never actually noticed before in my hundreds of hours of playing this game, is that the red lines are your policies. And the policies are used up in these slots over here. So I only have one more policy that I can pass. But I can do as many acts as I want, right? So the Tariff Act, that didn't count toward that the 6 figure that I have here. Confiscation Act, that didn't count. The Militia Acts don't count. If I were to do Emancipation, that doesn't count. Right? All of this stuff, anything connected by a blue line is an act, which means that they don't count against your number of policies. Anything that is red does. That's all. The red ones also, like, they don't really do anything right away. They just allow you to, again, increase the subsidies that you can spend. So take a look here, right? Now we've got, we have Industry 3. We can put $50 million of industry subsidies in our industry per year. That's nuts. That's a huge amount. I also have obviously taken back quite a lot of the other subsidies, so I don't actually think I need to pass a policy right now. I'm going to wait a couple of months. I'm going to see what happens. If it looks like I'm going to need a lot more manpower, I'm probably going to do Militia Act 4 before I do the Enrollment Act or the Bounties Act. This basically will increase the number of potential recruits I have anyway. And if we look at my military panel, and let's say I just want to add a unit, make sure I have this on all. I still have 60,000 volunteers that I have not taken. So I'm doing fairly well in manpower. I'm not that worried about my manpower at the moment. A couple of those acts can be pretty attractive, though. If I need more of a brown water fleet, I'll do civilian warships. If I need to strengthen the blockade. Now, this is a really interesting one because it doesn't actually do much. Like, it helps. It lowers the chance of European intervention. And it also decreases trade with Europe. But the legality of the blockade was actually like a really important political question during the Civil War. And there have been some, especially friendly to the CSA, that have argued that the fact that it was a blockade rather than port closures actually means that the United States acknowledged the existence of the CSA as a state. As not a rebellion of the United States, but a state unto itself. You can't blockade your own ports, for instance. But in order to make the blockade legal, in order to make port closures legal, it had to be effective. And so there was a whole lot of sort of political wrangling about making sure that the blockade was effective enough to be legally recognized as such for various other reasons. But I think I'm going to leave that alone for now. I don't even think I need to put in more funding into my political track to get more policies at the moment. I don't think I need to. Our treasury balance is looking pretty good. We got 30 million here. Again, massive increases thanks to the going over to 1.07 patch, and my surplus is down to 150 million, which is really great. So my credit rating is going up. My interest rate is taking a nosedive, and things are looking pretty good. So my industrial subsidies, my 50 million that I'm putting in there, I think are going to be just fine. So with that in mind, let's take another look at the Army of Missouri over here. So ideally, what I want to do is I want to bring Kearny. I want to bring a potent force under Kearny, and I want to bring it over here to work with Grant's Expeditionary Corps. I believe what my plan will be is that I want to bring Kearny and his army. I'm thinking of at least 20,000, something about the same size as Grant's force here. And I want Kearny to move on Nashville. I want Kearny to take Nashville. I want Grant to move down here to this rail junction in Jackson. And I want them both to march up. You know what? No. I think I want to move on. I want to move on Nashville, and I want Grant to move down here to Dyersburg. I eventually want to get to Memphis. That's the thing. But I do want to confront the Army of the Mississippi here as well. It's building up to 17,000, and I'd like to keep it around that number or less. So perhaps what I'll do is I'll move Kearny to Cairo. I'll move Grant down the river, and I'll move Kearny down the rail line. And that way we can make an amphibious landing over here, deal with the Army of Mississippi, force it to rout, and then Kearny can scoop up and kind of push it away a bit more aggressively. After that, I will send Kearny to go capture Nashville, which is undefended, and I'll continue down to Memphis with Grant's army. I think that's what I'm going to do. But in order to do that, I want Kearny to have a few more men, at least one other division. So let's get some transferring going on. Grant's Expeditionary Corps, and here's the Mississippi Corps of Instruction. So I'm going to move Buford to under Fremont real quick. And I think I'm going to move Wool's whole division right back to where it was before. Now, I don't want 2 first divisions, so I'm going to rename this one 2nd Division. And I don't think I want 4... I don't want 4 infantry brigades. So I'm going to move Abercrombie back to Fremont. I'm going to move these guys. Oh no, they can stay. And then I'm going to transfer Buford back over here. This way I have Buford as my 3rd division here. I also want another piece of artillery. So I'm going to take Wessel's, and I'm going to use that to increase the number in McCall's 1st Missouri Light. And I'm going to move him under Wool's division. And I'm going to see if I have any better artillery that I can give him. I can give him a 24-pound howitzer. He's already got a 12-pound howitzer. I can give him a 6-pounder. And it doesn't look like it. I probably should have given him the artillery first. But I'll upgrade him to a 24-pound howitzer. And this is going to be Kearny's corps under Grant's Expeditionary Corps. The Mississippi Corps of Instruction is going to stay here. And between the Department of the Missouri and the Mississippi Corps of Instruction, I've got about 10,000 men or so, which will be just fine for defending this little frontier. In fact, I'm going to make another division. I'm going to transfer Lyon's division to Fremont's Corps of Instruction here. And I'm going to transfer Abercrombie back over, and I'm going to transfer this whole division to be under Fremont. And again, just to adjust my ADHD, I'm going to do that. No, they're going to go stay there. Yeah, that's fine for now. I'll probably recruit. In fact, I will. This is the Corps of Instruction. I'm going to recruit 2 more brigades of infantry, and I'm going to take them from the Midwest. Iowa has enough for a small brigade, so I will recruit another small Iowan brigade. The Department of Missouri itself is going to be sort of a catch-all little group, but I'm going to do one more. See if I can get a Kansas brigade. Yeah, I've got enough. Kansas is, they're very committed to the cause. It's gonna look like that. I have 1,500 men. Okay, so between Fremont's little division here, it's going to be around 10,000 men or so. Looks like about 8,000. And that's going to be fine. And I'll just rename this Fremont's division, because it's Fremont's Frontier Division is what I'll call it. And he will be operating under McDowell here, the Department of the Missouri. So these guys are basically going to be patrolling the frontier and just making sure that St. Louis stays safe. And in the meantime, I'm going to move Kearny right now down toward Cairo. I'm going to let him rest up and get resupplied and get his readiness back up, and we will start this operation down the Mississippi. Really no reason to wait. It's February 1862. I don't have winter weather around here. It does say they're in winter quarters, but it doesn't actually have the debuff for operating in harsh weather. So that's what we're going to do. So the plan is come down the Mississippi here, land Grant, fight an amphibious assault against the Army of the Mississippi, and bring Kearny down this rail line to sit pretty at Jackson. So that's the idea. I hope operationally it works out. All right, and we have returned. So Kearny is now on his way to Grant. Oh, excuse me. Kearny is on his way to Grant, and I'm hoping pretty soon, maybe by the end of February, we'll start moving down the Mississippi here. So let's advance time a little bit more. Luckily, things look like they have quieted down a little bit in the east, but there are some very interesting plans going on back east that I'm pretty excited to get into. Obviously, I'm not going to be recording that on camera in this campaign, but I might keep some aside for some extra stuff that I might be working on a little bit later. So one thing to pay attention to, once you have two armies more or less in the same area, Kearny's readiness, again, went down quite a bit, even on that short train trip. And we're now both of these armies are going to be pulling from the Cairo depot. And you can already see Grant has picked clean the artillery ammunition from this depot. Artillery ammunition is a huge premium for both of these armies, and it's especially how I use artillery. I tend to do a lot of bombardment, which uses a lot more ammunition than usual. So it might be worth it to us to upgrade this supply depot in Cairo, especially since Cairo is going to be essentially the headquarters of this operation down the Mississippi River. However, to do that, we need to upgrade our logistical capacity. Let me zoom out so that's not blowing in my ears. It's not logistics reforms. It is supply reform. So supply reform costs 1.8 million, which isn't all that much. I have 7 million built up in the till, and I'm going to go for that. I'm going to do supply reform. And I want to take a look at a couple of other things as well. So I'm waiting on organization reform, 3.5 million, because again, I want to sort of wait until the narrative conditions have been met here. I'm uninterested in machine guns. I'm not going to do machine guns at all. I probably don't need too many other rifles, although later on I might do something like Sharps rifles. I'm probably not going to do repeating rifles at all. Rifled artillery is pretty attractive, but so are the Parrott rifles. So these both give you rifled iron artillery. But the Parrotts, I believe, give you 10, 20, and 30 pounder versions of the Parrott rifles. So all of the Parrotts that we have right now are only 10 pounders, and they're good pieces of artillery. They're excellent pieces of artillery. If we were to do rifled artillery, on the other hand, we'd get a couple more options, all quite a lot lighter. So the 3-inch ordnance rifle, the 6-pounder Weird rifle, those are fairly light pieces. So I think when I'm ready, I'm going to do the 10-pound Parrotts. And actually, I'm going to think about that. 2.5 million. It's about half our subsidies right now. So I'm going to go for it. And since our finances are much improved, I'm going to actually go ahead and order a few more weapons. So we've got some Jocelyn carbines I should give out to some of my troops. I think I'm going to order about 10,000 more. Cost about 10 million. I'm going to order... That's actually a lot more reasonable than I thought. 5.5 million for 128 pieces and in 115 days. I would like to have a bit more earlier, though. But you get into this, it's 60 days for 8. You might as well just wait a bit longer. I'm going to go for 64 pieces and 97 days. So just the 10-pounders for now. I'm going to get a few of those in. Oh, I can build 12-pounder Iron Napoleons. I'm not sure when I was able to do that. What project gave me that? It couldn't have been the brass guns, right? Although, they have the same standardization and the same cost. Is there any difference? The 12-pounders, or the Napoleons, the bronze Napoleons, are going to build quicker. Probably just because of the casting process for the brass is quite a lot different than the iron. Huh. I didn't know I had that. Interesting. Well, I should get some more. I do just like the Napoleons, so I'm going to order some more of those. Spending quite a lot of our money here, and eventually I will definitely put in some 30-pound and 20-pound Parrott rifles into my armies here. And again, if you're trying to go for a campaign that has a bit more of the historical flavor of the actual Civil War, and you're playing as the Union, leaning in really heavily into the production of artillery and really good rifled artillery is probably the way that you're going to get the most sort of federal vibe. Again, I've said this a couple of times already, but they were absolutely incredible artillerists. And early on in the war, especially in the first couple of years, it was the federal artillery that often made the difference in several battles here. So, all right, we've got some projects unlocked. I'm probably going to do a bit more. I'm not going into gunboats or the Navy because the Confederates have not really challenged my Navy at all. And the couple of things I am sort of thinking about testing out have a lot more to do with fort bombardment and using sort of Marine detachments rather than fighting big naval battles. So, just so you're all aware. So let's, again, increase the time here. I will come back in a few days before the end of February and recheck on, make sure Kearny's readiness goes up. And in the meantime, again, I'm going to double check back in the east and handle other things here in the campaign. So I will return shortly. Well, I lied. I said I was going to be back by the end of February, and I failed in that attempt. However, Kearny is up to green. Ammunition looks good. 98% rifle, or 98% artillery, 99% rifle. I neglected to upgrade this, didn't I? How much is this going to cost? $15 million. It's barely as much as I have in the treasury at the moment. And man, our surplus is going wild. This is, I'm already paying $135 million to support my supply depots as it is. I don't feel like I have that many, though. How much does it cost to support these things? Upkeep is 100K. Was that... That must have just been in the course of building them over the last several months. Because I've got the Rolla Depot. I probably don't need this one, the Papinsville Depot, anymore. Because that was mostly just to support this march here against the Missouri State Guard. Boy, 15 million is a lot to ask, but I'm going to do it. I already did it. I'm going to need to have a really important supply depot over here. So it's being upgraded. It's going to be 92 days. Man, they really wanted you to spend for that one. Well, okay, it's March 1862. It is about time for me to attempt a movement down the Mississippi River. I'm going to get Kearny to march to the Columbus railhead first. I'm going to order him to go by train. And as soon as Kearny passes Grant, I'm going to order Grant to move down the Mississippi, and challenge the Army of the Mississippi. So they now outnumber us. They have 22,000 men. So I might actually try to make sure Kearny stays in reinforcement range as soon as Grant hits him. And if either of them sort of hit the other first, I want to make sure that my other army can march in to support. So this is actually, I believe, the first time that we'll actually see in this campaign how you can use two armies to support one another on the screen. At least in within the campaign. So we'll see. I'm gonna again probably move Kearny down here to Jackson, and if the rebels move to challenge him at Jackson, of course, I'll have to bring Grant, across this way too. But I'm going to bring Grant. Nope. River movement, not rail movement, just river. Issue orders. So his forces should embark on riverboats, and I'm going to make sure Kearny moves by rail down this way. Let's advance some time a little bit. So we are still getting the movement debuff because it's winter, which is to be expected. Kearny, hopefully, ought to hop on the rail there. He's moving a lot slower than I expected him to. Come on, Kearny. What's taking you so long? There you go. Okay. He's getting on the rail. There he goes. We've got the other Rebel Army of the Mississippi here, 6,500 men. I'm not expecting they're going to do an awful lot. And luckily, Grant's readiness remained excellent through that entire move. So, moving downriver might actually be the thing to do. Alright, I'm going to get Kearny to march closer. It does look like he's already in reinforcement range. Here's a fun, interesting thing. I'll talk about this a bit later. I'll actually kind of save a screenshot of this and get back to it a bit later, because we are in an exciting time. But the French invasion of Mexico is something that I think it's a pretty interesting thing. And there's some fun history to talk about in regard to that. So I'll get back to this later. For now, let's continue. So we got Kearny, again, marching pretty quickly, and we're going to land Grant. Take out this Army of the Mississippi here. So it looks like the enemy Army of the Mississippi, Army of Mississippi, is marching right at Grant. So let's get him again moving forward. And there we go. So we have Grant's Expeditionary Corps against the Army of Mississippi. We outnumber them in guns by a factor of like 3 or 4. It looks like the enemy Army of the Mississippi is even attempting to kind of come over here and interrupt here. They have 6,500 men and 30 guns. But we have a slight delay. So Kearny is going to take about 2 hours to come onto the field. And so we don't actually need to do anything like try to go defensive on this at all. We have both of the armies that we need to. And so we're going to have to deploy on the field and hopefully wait for the reinforcements to arrive that will, we'll see them come on the field. We'll have to organize them and march them to come support Grant. But Grant initially is probably going to deploy slightly defensively unless he's got an advantage that he can take pretty quickly. But we outnumber them in every significant factor, and I think even Grant's individual army might be able to contend with the Army of Mississippi here, because I think they're green. But we'll see that in the pre-battle screen. See you there. Okay, here we are. So again, it's always important just to kind of read the thing here. We are actually deploying defensively too. That's pretty great. We're facing the Army of Mississippi under command of Gustavus W. Smith with a strength of some 19,000 men and 11 guns. The enemy army is green, just like we thought, and their morale is reported to be determined. Reports indicate their supply situation is outstanding. The supply state of our army is outstanding. So there are a couple of ways to check on how long it's going to take for our allied armies to arrive, and the very first one is in the HQ report. So if you look at the HQ report, you click on Union, you'll see both of the armies, both of the corps that will show up on the field. Obviously, we have Grant's Expeditionary Corps already on the field. We have the Army of the Missouri arriving in 3 hours. So that way, this just tells you, it's the consolidated condition report here, and that'll tell you when they're going to arrive. And often, if you go up again, sometimes it'll say, hey, look, Kearny is the best corps. It's the most experienced, it's the men, the most men, and it gives you a rundown of pretty much all of the the stuff here. You also get in this one, which is something to pay attention to, especially over the course of a campaign, the level of training. So Army of the Missouri is obviously older. It's been embodied a lot longer than Grand Tactician Corps, so its training level is quite a bit higher, and that affects its morale and it affects everything else. So it gives you the thing of the best corps here. So condition report will tell you when they're arriving. The strength report will give you more detail about the exact numbers of everyone, right? I've got fewer infantry in the Army of the Missouri, but I've got a lot more cavalry. I've got men in the artillery, you know, obviously. And the combat report, this will give you overall, once forces are engaged and starting to fight, it'll tell you casualties that they are inflicting and taking. And the last, the commander report, just gives you, you know, who the guys are who are in charge, their level of fame, their leadership scores, all of this other stuff. So if you ever want more information, like a numerical information rather than the sort of abstract scores that they give on the campaign screen, you come over to the commander report and you take a look at that. So right now, Grant is more famous. His leadership is lower. His initiative is slightly higher. His administration is higher, and his cunning is higher than Kearny. Kearny is slightly less famous, but he is a better leader. And you know, their initiative scores are pretty much the same. Their admin scores are close. And Kearny is less cunning than Grant. But we'll find out. So you can close that. You can close the HQ report, and that'll actually let you like turn the camera, rotate the camera. And the other way that you can look and see where your reinforcements are coming from, if you hit the order of battle button down here and go to the next unit, you can hover over and it'll say scheduled for approximately 4 hours, expected to arrive from southeast. Southeast is probably this guy here, maybe, or over here, which is all right. It might not be all that helpful, but initially, just as my initial sort of deployment, I'm going to put them here. And they are coming from this side. So again, we have to think about how they might decide to cross the river, because that is their largest choke point. They can either come right across Stone Bridge here, right? They can come down, you know, go into Centerville and mark down the Centerville Pike until they get to this crossing, which this is a very narrow crossing. It's only the one bridge, and I've got a lot of, you know, space to defend and deploy. It's surrounded by swamps. This would be a very poor choice for the rebels. This isn't much better though. The thing that this affords is that because there's dense wood cover, I can't really deploy artillery effectively to challenge this crossing. But I could just as easily deploy over here. But see, if I deploy over here, they can march around, and I'm going to have to move to defend this crossing. So the choice is basically, you know, what do I do? I don't have any cavalry that I can use to scout. I can try to deploy facing this way, but then if my, you know, I'm going to send skirmishers out to scout. If my skirmishers go around and they see them coming down the Centerville Pike, I can try to turn around. It wouldn't be that hard to deploy defensively along this fence. And if I get a second day, which I likely won't because it's only 1:15 in the morning, I can, you know, I can really settle in. I can build some fortifications. I can kind of entrench my guns, that sort of thing. Now, I've said several times before, I tend to be quite assertive as a field commander. But I think, given the fact that I'm outnumbered, not significantly, but I'm outnumbered, at least for now, and given the fact that they have two pretty equally viable crossings, and if I deploy fully engaged to either, they can very easily march around to the other side. I'm going to be boring and conservative and deploy basically like over here. And I'm going to have just this one division, my first division under Crook, deploy a little bit ahead. I'm going to have Hancock deploy to the rear. And basically, if I see them coming down this way, I can just turn Doubleday to engage that way. If they're coming down this way, I can bring up Crook while the rest of my divisions come in along the fence and deploy over here. So that is my very boring, un-Grant-like, unaggressive, boring initial deployment. We'll see. So let's press play. Let's get me some skirmishers out to act as my scouting arm. and go forward 10 times so that we're not sitting here for weeks while we wait. Okay, so there is a third crossing that I neglected to talk about initially, which is right through this little hunting trail through the swamp, which as a third option isn't so bad, but it's not actually no. Oh wait, nope. I want to stop them because they're in a pretty decent spot already. I'm going to take Doubleday and Hancock, and I'm going to move Hancock here, and I'm going to move Doubleday here. So yeah, I neglected to cover this little trail here, and this might be more like a probe. And in 1.07, the AI, especially, I think the biggest improvement they've made so far in the AI in the battle is the willingness for the AI to disengage when they find an unfavorable engagement, right? So if I really want to pound this army to ruin, to absolute ruin, what I need to do is let them cross, let them get into a decent position, and then pound them to smithereens if I can. It's going to be hard because I can't really deploy my artillery all that well in the jungle. And I'm actually going to have to probably move Crook back because they're in a poor position and I don't want their guns to be flanked by guys in the jungle here. But yeah, so coming across this little trail is fine. I don't actually really want to contest their crossing because I want them to fully engage. Now, I'm not going to be able to chase anybody down because of the way that they have turned all of retreating units into airbenders, but I can at the very least, again, sort of position things initially so to allow the maximum amount of damage when they cross and come into this open ground. Or you know what? I don't know. This is such a tricky little area. I'm definitely going to keep Hancock moving that way, but I'm going to back Crook up to where Hancock was just to make things even more confusing. And I'm going to move Doubleday back to this position here because they have to come for this objective. And the way things are now, they're going to have a lot of time to form up in this jungle. And it's only been a little less than 2 hours, so I've still got some time before Kearny's forces arrive. And I'd like Kearny's forces to arrive before anything major starts happening. But so far, we've only seen these two. Oh, okay, there we go. Oh, never mind. They're moving down the railroad beds. Okay. So I'm glad I'm moving so hastily. Making all the right subtle decisions here. Well, it turns out, okay, so my 3rd division under Doubleday will be in a position to contest. I'm going to move Crook back to basically close to where he started. Hancock is going to, for now, stay there. If I really need to get Hancock's infantry in here, I'll detach their artillery, and I'll just move the whole division back over this way. But yeah, as you can see, I'm a very subtle and highly intelligent player who understands all the subtleties of this game. All right, I'd like Doubleday to get a bit of a move on. Double time. And I want Crook to get a bit of a move on as well. All right. Okay. Nope. They have turned around and they're marching back up the railroad bed. And it looks like they're probably going to... Yeah, they're crossing way up here on the north. So, cool. Just, you know... this does mean that their men will very likely be quite exhausted by the time they get to fight my men, which I'll take. It's not ideal. Again, it'd be really nice to contest the crossing, and in fact, I don't even want... Which skirmisher is this? Burnham's detachment. Bring them in. I don't want to worry about that. And it looks like even... I don't want to send my men into a swamp. So I'm gonna let this guy, who is that? Hunton? I'm gonna let Hunton march through the swamp all he wants. Okay, so we now have Kearny's forces arriving on the field. Let's slow this down just a bit. So Kearny, of course, is coming from this southeast entrance here. It's quite far away from the battlefield as it is. So again, I've got some choices. I can try to rush them across the stone bridge here, or I can bring them up to one of these northern crossings and get behind the enemy. But once again, your men don't shoot at fleeing enemies, and you can't really chase them down anymore because of the changes they've made to the speed and ability to, you know, fly that they've given to retreating units. So I can't really use them in a way to sort of block their retreat paths or get in the way. So I think I might just kind of bring them in along the stone bridge and have them just come in and simply just reinforce my main line. Again, it's the conservative strategy. It's not the very exciting strategy. It's a very boring one, but it is, you know, strategically and tactically sound. It's just not very interesting. Also, I'd like my artillery to move over here. Okay, so you really have to, when you have these reinforcement armies, okay, so once again, they're marching back the other way. Man, this is so wild. Anyway, when you have your reinforcement armies come in, they're going to spend a good chunk of time just getting into position. And you have to wait until everybody's out of each other's way to really start issuing movement orders, because you can clog up the roads really easily. So I'm actually just going to take Buford's cavalry division, and I'm going to order both of the brigades of cavalry to start moving around to essentially to scout. I'd like a bit more vision over here because, you know, I hope this time Tig Tileman is actually going to cross the river rather than just turn around as soon as he sees my men. Because I'd actually really like to have a battle here. Now, what is this? Hunton. So this is, again, I think that he broke just because of exhaustion. 2,900 men broken before anything happened, simply because they got super tired when they were marching around in the swamp. So I suppose I'll take that. But once again, right, you have to really micromanage this sort of march. You have to really make sure that you're kind of watching your men and making sure that your divisions don't clog each other up on the road. So you have to give individual orders one at a time and make sure you allow some space in between to make sure that your divisions, again, are moving harmoniously. And it does look like maybe they're coming back around. I really don't know. At this point, I'm beyond speculation. At this point, I don't really think I know what they're doing. It's certainly not what I would do. I take that how you will. All right, get my second division moving to about the same spot. I'll deploy some scouts here under Carlin. See if I can get a bit wider vision over this swamp area. So just Tileman here. And, you know, I will actually... Here, I'll order these guys forward. Nope, they're just going to bounce. Literally bouncing them away. I'm not going to be able to catch them. Certainly not with infantry, so I'm not even going to bother. 6-pounder, 6-pounder, 6-pounder. Nothing good. Move my 6-pounders up this way, though. I'm actually going to detach them. I'll move them over as well. Let's get some skirmishers out just to stick them while my artillery moves around. And yeah, they are coming from this direction as well. So I'm going to leave my 2nd Division over here in place. Okay. Yeah, they're being extremely bizarre. I think what they want to do is deploy over this way, and they're just sort of marching in this sort of indirect route. Because the pathfinding has made some kind of goofy decisions here. I really wish you'd shut up, artillery. So I want to see if I can catch these guys. It'd be lovely if I could, because I'd like to break. I'd like to stop them from deploying, if possible. There we go. Looks like Tig is not going to take the bait. And my skirmishers are seemingly doing pretty well at slowing these guys down. And looks like I've got my 1st Division ready to come around this way. Give them orders to double time. I'll bring Carlin a little closer. I might be able to be a bit more assertive with my cavalry. Tileman broke very easily. Turn Morgan around a little bit. And I'll move Brooks up again to challenge this crossing. Move Kimball. Make sure my infantry is back there to support. Boy, they are really committed to being neck deep in this swamp. And somehow my skirmishers have stopped at least two whole divisions completely. Stop Smith here in the jungle. They're gonna break, I assume, quite soon. And yeah, I'm gonna bring Grierson up here because he's got these kind of absurd Hall rifles that he can unleash on that infantry brigade. There they go. Okay. So Heyman's skirmishers broke, as I expected they would. I don't want that to happen at all. Move them to this cover here. And once again, I'm going to shift another whole division back this way. Once again, I seriously doubt I'll be able to do anything close to capturing. Like, look at how fast they're moving. Even on just one speed. Like, I could order my men to charge, but I'll do it just so you can see. Like, I'm surprised I even touched them. I did inflict about 50 casualties, but it's not going to be nearly enough to force them to surrender. 1.07 still has the problem that as soon as the skirmishers engage, they will not stop doing that single engagement for love nor money. The only order that you can actually the only order you can give them is to return back to their parent unit, and that's it. Once they do that, that's it. You can't fine-tune them anymore once they're engaged. All right, let's speed up some time. So far, this has been okay. We've had a couple of, like, really, wow, 1,100 casualties already. We've had a couple of, obviously, quite lopsided engagements. Mostly just, like, the AI picking really bad positions and having their march order all wonky. But again, you know, I'm not able to inflict a ton of casualties because I cannot... There's no hope for me to try to catch up to their routing units and do anything about them at all. Kimball back this way. But we have not had our first, you know, a really serious engagement quite yet. Sumner, I'll move over here for now. Okay, so here comes their cavalry, Humphrey's regiment. It's Pender. And like always, you have to watch out for suicide charges against your artillery. They really, really, really love that. So make sure to position your men to discourage that as much as you can. And I'm going to be a bit more aggressive with my infantry here. Get up and start a general engagement, because I'd rather have them worry about my infantry than try to charge my artillery. I do not know what Morgan is doing. I don't know why he would be doing that at all. I'm going to do something kind of cheeky with my 3rd Michigan here. I'm going to have them spit out some skirmishers, and then I'm going to have them reform the line. I'm going to have the skirmishers actually fall back over here, and I'm going to have them come up and engage those guns. And I'm going to turn Russell onto counter battery fire, because again, I think that seems to improve their ability to. I feel like it improves their experience rate rather than a little bit better than fire at will. I'm not 100% sure, but that's my surmise. Nope. That is not my cow. Oh, it's my... Okay. For some reason, Winfield Scott Hancock is like right up in 3rd Michigan's grill over here. Alright, I'm going to move up and engage these cavalry. I'm likely going to move Burnham. I'm going to have these guys kind of go up and fire a couple of volleys and then do a withdrawal a little bit while the rest of my infantry get into position. And because I have it, I'm going to detach the artillery because it won't be able to move. I'm going to bring Buford's cavalry up to about here. Get Kearny sort of closer to his men. Yep, I want to get these guys to start falling back because I do not want a whole infantry brigade up on their flank. Not without support in any case. So, Burnham moving back in good order. He's going to be able to engage Hunton's brigade here. But it looks like they've recovered their morale. Where I told this artillery to detach. Or maybe it was this one. There's no real good way to... Suppose I should just bring them up this way. Again, I swear I told that artillery to detach. I do not want to carry the artillery through the jungle. Just stop. Surprised how long the AI is sticking with this engagement. They've lost 1,900 men of their total 19,000, which is not a terribly good casualty ratio. And they're pretty significantly outnumbered. I expected them to attempt to make a withdrawal by now, but I suppose they're not. AI also seems to be really invested in hunting down skirmishers for some reason. I gotta say, Crook's division doing pretty well, doing the bulk of the fighting over here. Really favorable casualty ratios. Looks like they're beginning to make their withdrawal. See if I can get my cavalry to be able to do anything at all. I want their guns. I have said before, I am greedy, and what I mostly covet is enemy artillery. But yeah, they are withdrawing. And you know, it's a good decision. They probably waited a bit too long. 2,500 casualties is quite a lot to take on a failed attack. But they will be withdrawing, and look at that, I have taken their guns. Alright, not the cleanest battle. The terrain was a little unfavorable to me. It was obviously unfavorable for the enemy as well, of course, and probably much more so for them. But in terms of sort of making a clear defensive engagement, suckering them into an attack in order for me to maximize the casualties I could inflict, obviously it was a little tougher to do than I wanted it to be, which is unfortunate. Let's see if Grierson and Carlin can beat up on Tig Talman a little bit. I doubt it. They're not going to catch up to him. Nope. But yeah, there we go. So, minor federal victory. Extremely light casualties, like 1% casualties for us. And, you know, a little over 10%, maybe 12% or so for the enemy. Not too bad. A decent beginning for Grant's army here. All right, victory at Dyersburg. Once again, a pretty great beginning, an auspicious beginning for our campaign down the Mississippi. So beat up a little bit on the Army of Mississippi and force them away. We'll see what their retreat path looks like in a bit. 490 enemy soldiers have been paroled. And, you know, I'm going to actually bring this up after we review, after we kind of see where this enemy force is going. Let's advance time a little bit here. Looks like they're retreating. And yeah, the Army of Mississippi here decided to come in and turn immediately around. So good for them. All right, still looks like we're drawing provisions from quite a few places. We're getting it from the railhead here, from Jackson. I'm glad I went and snagged that when I could. And I'm actually going to move Kearny right over to Jackson. And I'm going to have Grant pursue as soon as they disengage. Jeez. But I eventually would like to have Grant pursue. It's right up the road here. It looks like we've captured the supply dump. The army has actually not tried to destroy it, unless that's going to happen in just a second. Which again, I'm still really impressed with the AI having done that in the last battle. That was unexpected and really smart. I'm gonna halt them because it looks like, yeah, they might be coming down. I'm gonna bring them over to this intersection here. If I can intercept them as they're withdrawing, once again, if they're still not ready enough to engage in a fight, I can still inflict a ton of casualties on them as they're withdrawing. And that's one of the reasons I'm trying to push Grant into right behind them. I want to keep them moving along, and I want to push them south. I don't actually want them north of me. I don't want to be distracted from my campaign here. What I want to do is push them down, down, down into Memphis, crush them at Memphis, and continue moving down this rail network here. Of course, this also brings up, I'd like to capture Nashville. I'd really like to capture Nashville. And I think I'm going to reinforce Grant's Expeditionary Corps here with a couple of units back from St. Louis. What used to be the Corps of Instruction. I'm going to send some units over to Grant. I'd like Grant to be a bit over 20,000 men. And I'd like Kearny to be maybe another brigade heavier as well. What I think I want to do is give Grant some cavalry. He needs some cavalry. And I'd like to send... I think I'm going to send Kearny to capture Nashville. and then rejoin. Do I want to try to make a detour through Decatur and then come back across to Corinth? I don't think I'll be able to hold Decatur, but coming into Alabama and chipping away at support in Alabama might be a nice kind of short-term reward here. But we'll see. We'll see. That's got to think one step at a time. So yeah, they are withdrawing. Yep, there they go. They've been intercepted once again, and we're inflicting a bit more casualties that way. And it looks like... Oh no, I've got another economy alarm with this mill I just captured. Okay. Well, again, an auspicious start. I'm going to park Kearny. No, what I'm going to do is... I'm going to, again, reinforce Grant. Grant needs cavalry. And... I'd like to be able to get it, if I can, from the Department of the Missouri, though I do not have any cavalry at all. The Army of the Missouri under Kearny has it, of course, but nothing on this half of the campaign map does. I don't want to transfer over the entire division under Kearny, so I think what I'm going to do is replace him. Sturgis is okay. I think he was an artillery commander earlier in this campaign. George Stoneman is okay. I already have Buford. Buford is a pretty famous cavalry commander. Eugene Carr looks pretty good as a cavalry division commander. Charles Whiting looks all right. Low fame, but he's got pretty robust points otherwise. Of course, I can hear all of you just shouting, Custer, Custer, get Custer. And, you know, Custer's okay. Custer's just fine. As a, you know, he was... Let's say I like Custer better in the Civil War than I do later. Let's do Lew Wallace, sorry. So Lew Wallace is interesting. Lew Wallace, I've got both Wallaces now over in this theater. And I told you before I was going to talk a little bit about W.H.L. Wallace. W.H.L. Wallace, we'll get to. He was the colonel of the 11th Illinois Volunteer Infantry. He was elected colonel when they were mustering, and then he actually served in Cairo, and he served as part of Grant's Expeditionary Corps. He missed Fort Belmont, but he was actually there at the capture of Forts Henry and Donelson. And Lew Wallace was also with Grant in that short campaign, and Lew Wallace was actually the colonel of the 11th Iowa or the 11th Indiana. Does it say where he's from? It must have been the 11th Indiana. So there were two colonels Wallace, both in charge of the 11th Regiment of their respective states, both of which started with an I. And when Lew Wallace met W.H.L. Wallace, he actually joked that they must have been the terror of postmasters all across the West. The two of them got along pretty famously. Like, they didn't hang out all that much or anything like that, but they liked and respected each other. Everyone liked and respected William Wallace. He was by pretty much all accounts an exceptional commander, and he was one of these guys that was never he was a veteran of the Mexican War, but he didn't go to West Point. He didn't consider himself a professional soldier. He considered himself a citizen soldier, and that is important for the Civil War. The difference between somebody like Grant, who, though he is a West Pointer, left the army after the war, right? There's a lot of degrees of sort of like professional experience and professionalism and intellectual capability and skill and charisma and all that. And the simple dichotomy that's very popular in Civil War pop history of you either have professional soldiers or political generals is, I think, like cartoonish and wrong. And I'm gonna save you all from listening to my rants about it, so I'm not gonna do that. But William H.L. Wallace is really fascinating and has a bit of a tragic story. He was killed at Shiloh, And there's a bunch of letters between him and his wife, who he was absolutely devoted to, that reveal a whole lot about sort of the home life back on, back home, while these wives and women, daughters, and are waiting for their husbands and people to come back from the war, and any news about them at all. And it's absolutely heartbreaking when William H.L. Wallace is killed. His wife had actually come down for a surprise visit against his wishes, and she was there. He was mortally wounded at Shiloh, and died several days later in his wife's arms. So now we have both Wallaces, just to make this story, this very sad little story here. So, all right, I'm recruiting I believe this is the 3rd Indiana Cavalry. Even if it isn't, it is now. And they're going to be recruiting in here in 24 days. So not super quick. I really wish, I'm actually going to take the opportunity now to zip back over here to the Department of the Missouri and recruit a couple more brigades of cavalry, because I want them for this exact purpose. I want them to be in reserve to transfer over in case I need them in other armies. We got another, we don't. A small one. We can recruit some Missouri cavalry though, and Missouri right now is sitting pretty. Missouri has quite a lot of state support. Obviously we can look at the front lines here and we can see they still have this awkward section of southwestern Missouri. And again, I'm not convinced that it is strategically terribly important. But I am going to send Fremont's Frontier Division, at least over here, to maybe push that back a little bit. Why not? Give them some experience marching around. All right, Confederates. They are offered bounties. And so one of the things, I talked about this a little bit before, so a recruiting bounty is something the Union can do too. And essentially it gives new recruits like a bounty when you join. You get, it says here $300 per recruit, but that's Confederate dollars, which are garbage. In any case, one of the problems with bounties is that whenever you start issuing bounties to recruit men into your army, you get what's called bounty jumping. And bounty jumping means that you go to the recruiting headquarters of the 45th Michigan Infantry and you say, I'd like to join the 45th Michigan Infantry. And they say, cool, sweet, here's $300. And you take that $300 and you go and do the first day of soldiering and everything, and then you desert that night. And then you walk down the road. The 45th was recruiting in Lansing. So you walk down the road to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and you report in. You say, my name is Bob Soldier. I'd like to join the 46th Michigan Infantry. And they say, sweet, here's $300. And you get another $300, and you do another single day of soldiery, and then you desert once again. And so this was something that they were kind of not professional necessarily, but, shysters, con men, that would get involved in stuff like this and just try to run up their bounties and get as much money as they could at the expense of the War Department. So that was something. So, all right, anyway. So Grant's Expeditionary Corps, I think I want to move them. No, I'm going to move Kearny. Kearny is going to ride the rails to Nashville, and he's going to take Nashville. And I'm going to move Grant to Jackson. I'm going to put him on rail movement. And once Nashville is secured, we're going to bring Kearny back down. Kearny is going to come and sit in between Corinth and Memphis to cut it off. Sit here in Bolivar. And we're going to move Grant down to capture Memphis. And it looks like Grant also now has a perk. So I think we're operating in enemy territory. So Ambulance Corps and Flying Column are both really attractive. I do like the Bureau of Military Information for intelligence gathering, but we level up by scouting, which I haven't been doing a whole lot of. There's also River Expedition, River Movement Speed plus 25%, and Siege Assault Efficiency. I'm going to do that because this is a riverborne expedition primarily. So I'm gonna move them that way. And I think we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to move Kearny down here to Bolivar, and I might move Grant back down the Mississippi to assault Memphis that way. So, pretty exciting stuff in this episode of the campaign. Before it gets too much more serious, I'm going to take a pause and check things out back on the other side of the map. Be right back. Okay. Kearny here is moving into Nashville. And once again, a lot of other exciting stuff is going on back east. So I think I'm going to call it here at this, right after Kearny here captures Nashville. I think we're going to call this episode. I have a lot that I want to do for the next one. I think we're finally going to pull the trigger on our core reorganization, as long as I've got enough subsidies for it. Let me double check that. Logistics reforms, military education, organization reform. I do have enough to buy the project. So I'm going to do that right at the beginning of the next episode, and you'll see us reorganizing basically this entire theater. So we're going to have Grant in command of the army that we're going to call, let's call the Army of the Mississippi, the Army of the Trans-Mississippi, Army of Tennessee, something like that. We're gonna organize that. We're going to get everything all set, and I believe I'm actually going to start a second little kind of campaign series, because there's some interesting stuff going on back east which I have not actually ever been able to do before. And this is an interesting little battle here. I'm probably going to withdraw from this one. In any case, I guess that's a natural enough place to call it there. You see, we did actually just capture Nashville, and we're gonna get things moving quite quickly here at the beginning of the next episode. So, thank you once again for watching, and we'll see you next time.